Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by TheLines.com. Previewing the Final Four with the man John Ewing. You can follow him on X at John Ewing, data analyst for BetMGM Sportsbook. I'm Eli Hershkovich here for TheLines.com. How are we doing, John? How is the NCAA tournament treated you and yours?
What's going on, Eli? Yeah, my bracket, even though it's all chalk, is destroyed. And from the Sportsbook perspective, all these favorites been really good for customers.
Absolutely. So over the last two rounds of the NCAA tournament, favorites going 12-0 straight up, underdogs with just 12 outright wins from the round of 64 onward. That's tied for the fewest in the seeding era, and also making NCAA tournament history with that 12-0 mark from the Sweet 16 onward for favorites straight up. So I'm assuming it hasn't been the best result behind the counter, just with moneyline parlay bettors racking up wins left and right.
Yeah, the moneyline favorites winning, like I said, definitely been good for bettors. But we saw in the Sweet 16 Elite Eight, favorites only 12-5 against the spread. So they're not winning and covering. If both had happened, it would be a field day for bettors. But it wasn't the best outcome. It wasn't the worst.
You know what I hate, John, is hearing casual bettors, novice bettors, or just college basketball fans saying, well, because I had a buddy text me this was bound to be the chalkiest tournament ever. You could say that, but you go back to the Elite Eight, as you said, Texas Tech didn't win outright, but they covered. They were up 10 with over 5 minutes left. Ole Miss, in my mind, especially when you look at the shot volume battle, should have beat Michigan State. They covered on that backdoor heave from Matt Morrell on Friday night. And Arkansas was up double digits with over 4 minutes left. John Calipari lost for the first time in his career, up by 6+ points at halftime. So I'm sure you're screaming this, seeing our BetMGM traders are screaming this, seeing the results come in behind the counter that, yeah, we've gotten shock, but it could have gone the other way just like that.
Yeah, of course. Coming into the tournament before the round 64, it was a clear group of favorites. Duke, Florida, Houston, Auburn, all plus 600 or better. And I know we were talking off mic about KenPom rankings, all for the one seeds being for the best we've ever seen coming into the tournament. And some years, it just goes like this, where the best teams rise to the top, and that's what we've seen this year.
So speaking of what you just said, this is the first time or second time ever in NCAA tournament history we're getting 4 1 seeds to make the Final Four, the other time being in 2008 when Mario Chalmers sent the game to overtime for Kansas against Memphis. Jayhawks win it with Bill Self.
I still am sad about that. I had Memphis in that game.
Fair enough. You had Memphis ATS, or what was the spread in that game? Jog my memory.
Oh, man.
I think they were favored.
I gotta go way back in time. I have to go back to hanging out in the bars with my buddies out of college. I feel like it was like 6-point spread or something.
Yeah. So with that result in mind, with that Final Four, as you also hinted at, 4 of the top 10 teams in KenPom history playing in San Antonio this weekend. Duke behind the 98-99 Duke Blue Devils with a plus 43 net efficiency margin. Tied for 5th on the list is Houston with 2020-2021 Gonzaga. 8th is this year's Florida team, and then 10th is the Auburn Tigers, the number 1 overall seed. Ironically, Auburn, despite the fact that they were given the number 1 overall seed, has the worst odds among all 4 teams to cut down the nets at this juncture. So, John, what is the liability to win it all? Whether it was pre-tournament or at this point, bets that have come in.
Yeah, I mean, we've shared out a number of notable bets on the tournament, the biggest being $500,000 wager on Duke at plus 350 before the tournament started. Duke is by far our biggest liability. Of our 50 largest wagers we've taken on the NCAA tournament outright winner, 30 of them have been on the Blue Devils.
Wow. So for your money, do you have any action on Duke or any of these teams left in the Final Four? Any pre-flop tournament bets?
No, I don't. I had some future bets on my Missouri Tigers. I got real excited about them about the end of February when they went on a run, and then they just completely fell apart down the stretch. So it was fun. I had some closing line value. That's what I can say.
That's all you can ask for. By the way, just to pay off our conversation earlier, Memphis was favored by 2. So if Chalmers didn't hit that shot, you're probably covering. And John
You beat me to it. I was literally pulling up the historical database and I was searching. Yeah, that's good. I was gonna be like, hey, a throwback. No, okay. You're too fast, Eli. Too fast on the keyboard.
That's what we do. We're both prepping. We're both trying to figure out and dig back in the NCAA tournament history of the timeline during the show. But with these 4 teams in the Final Four, if we look back, and everyone wants to talk about the transfer portal being a net negative for the NCAA tournament, well, players that combined, 29 players that tallied double-figure minutes in the Elite Eight, 20 of those players were with their respective programs among these 4 teams last year. 4 were freshmen, 5 were transfers. So there have been a lot of retainees on Florida, Duke, Houston, and Auburn. A couple transfers mixed in, but most being retainees, which is an important note. Florida getting Elijah Martin from FAU, for instance. But speaking of the Florida Gators, number 1 seed coming out of the East or West region, taking on the number 1 overall seed in the tournament in Auburn, and Florida a 2.5-point favorite, minus 150 on the money line, total of 160.5. Now, there's been, unlike Duke Houston, there's been minimal action on the point spread for this game since it opened at Florida minus 2.5. Obviously, a lot to do with the status of John Broome, despite the fact that it seems like his elbow is going to be okay for Saturday. Bruce Pearl said it on Monday. He's getting an MRI, doesn't expect him to impact his minutes come the Florida matchup and the rematch from their January tilt. And Broome said the same thing after their win over Michigan State. Bit of a Willis Reed moment, whether it was exaggerated or not. So, to me, is this line any sort of protection from an influx of Florida money if Broome maybe were to be a little bit limited? Or how do you see this, and where has the money been going despite the fact that the number hasn't moved?
Yeah, to start, we got about 67% of bets. Over 60% of the money is on Florida at minus 2.5. I don't think that's too surprising. Again, what we often see is recency bias from bettors. What has happened, in the last game or during the NCAA tournament, and just this last weekend, we mentioned all the favorites, 12-0 in the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight winning. You have a small line, so I'm not surprised to see Florida getting the early action in this game.
What about the total? It's been bet down from 161.5 to 160.5, and we've seen unders hit at a 57% clip. So that not being surprising that maybe the number has been bet down, but also Broome status mixed in. So I'm assuming, like Florida, even though the spread hasn't moved, in this case, you've seen some money on the under.
Yeah, we have. I mean, the betting splits in terms of tickets is closer to 50-50, but 71% of money is on the under. And as you said, that total has dropped a point from the opener at 161.5. Again, that maybe I have not talked to the trader specifically if there was a sharp action on it, but it could be bettors jumping early thinking, hey, maybe this is going to be a little bit closer. And if the players aren't 100%, that all the better on and under.
You go back to the first time these teams play, the only time these SEC rivals squared off this year, they combined for 171 points. Florida was up by double digits at Auburn for much of that game, surprisingly, just with Auburn's home dominance the last couple of seasons. And it was without Elijah Martin, and the Gators shot 39% from deep, or above 39% from 3 in that one. And both teams are vulnerable on the offensive glass, so keep that in mind with a potential maybe mixed results from deep, from 3 for both teams with a shooting backdrop as well. Maybe some rebounding props could be had depending on where the number fluctuates with both of these front courts. John Broome in particular, as his status becomes clear, maybe he's worth a look for the rebounding prop over on his end. But what player prop action stands out behind the counter so far? I'm assuming Walter Clayton Jr. with his points prop at 20.5, but anything with him, anything else across the board for this game?
Yeah. Okay. In general, right? Player props overs. That is how most casual bettors like to wager. It's more fun to cheer for points and positive things and outcomes. So most props, the over is the popular side. You mentioned Broom, right, and his injury and maybe some question marks there. Early action, though, interestingly, 77% of money is on his under in terms of points, sitting at either 17.5 or 18.5, depending on where you got it. But some bettors coming out of the gate thinking, hey, maybe this is a spot to bet his under.
Interesting. I'm sure the injury plays a role there. We did see Texas Tech's JT Toppin struggle in the paint. He hit some threes for sure throughout the game in the Elite Eight, but he did struggle at the rim against Florida's bigs, and maybe Broom's elbow hampers him a little bit during the game. But either way, an interesting note there for sure. I'm debating about how to go about my Auburn futures ahead of the Final Four. I have 35-40-1 from last April, so I'm definitely monitoring Broom's status pretty closely as the week goes along. But looking ahead to the second Final Four matchup between the number 1 overall seed in the East region, Duke, taking on the number 1 seed in the Midwest region, Houston. And unlike Florida, Auburn, there's been some pushback both ways on this spread. As we mentioned before the show got started, Duke minus 4.5 on open. It's been bet up to 5.5. Now at other shops, there's been a little bit of pushback on Houston. BetMGM sitting at Duke minus 5.5, but juice in Houston's direction on the point spread with a total of 136.5. So for my money, I think this number comes back a little bit. Where do you see it going behind the counter so far?
Yeah, you said open 4.5. We've seen some sharp action on Duke. Number ticked up. Overall, 75% of bets are on the Blue Devils to cover. Again, not surprising. Favorites winning in the Sweet 16 Elite Eight. You have Cooper Flagg. You have Duke as a blue blood. None of this surprises me at all. I would imagine those percentages will stay pretty steady throughout the weekend and leading up to tip, just because when you have, again, you have a blue blood and you have the best player in college basketball going to go number 1 in the NBA draft, it always attracts attention.
Absolutely. And even with Cooper Flagg going under his points prop over 3 of his first 4 tournament games, Duke shooting an incredible 47.3% from behind the arc in the tournament. And on the other side, Houston is holding their opponents to an even 24% clip from deep. So whether you like three-pointer overs, depending on the player in this game in terms of three-point makes on either side, to me, it's going to, the result, whether you look at the point spread or the outright winner, is going to boil down to whether Houston's defense wins the game in terms of Duke's three-point shooting or vice versa. Now, with Flagg in particular, as I mentioned, he hasn't been scoring an absurd amount. You go back to the Alabama game again, he went under his points prop in the Elite Eight. Grant Nelson playing pretty tight defense, but 18.5 is his points prop number. So despite the fact that he hasn't been dominant, I'm assuming we also haven't seen bettors rushing to the window to back the under.
Correct. No way. 88% of bets are on the over right now. So again, it's not surprising. Now, one bet maybe, tell me what you think about this. His assist prop is sitting at 4.5. And actually 99% of bets are on the over. He's averaging just under 6 assists or just over 5 assists per game in the tournament so far. So there's one maybe where if you think, okay, his stroke hasn't been following, but he has so many great players around him. Do you just bet that 4.5 over?
It is interesting.
If you like Duke to win too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Houston, despite the fact that they have the number 1 defense on KenPom, they rank 311th in opponents' assist rate. So they do give up their fair share of assists. This isn't a team that forces you to score in isolation, let's say like in an elite defense like St. Mary's. So definitely worth considering on his over assist prop. But how about MOP with Cooper Flagg atop the odds board? Now, Duke is favored to win it all at minus 110 if we look at national title odds, and Cooper Flagg is plus 110 to win most outstanding player in the tournament, which is pretty much to win most outstanding player in the Final Four, even though the NCAA doesn't coin it like that. Walter Clayton Jr. plus 375. Right behind Flagg, then Broome, plus 700. LJ Cryer of Houston of around 10-1-ish territory, and Uzan as well. Houston's point guard, 16-1. Pettiford and Knippel for Duke, both 20-1. So any bets pre-tournament that maybe are of note for BetMGM? And then I'm assuming it's too early in the week for you to have anything substantial on this market over the first couple days since it reopened.
Well, I mean, again, Cooper Flagg, right? He's the star, the tournament star of the, it's what they lead with whenever they start talking about college basketball. He opened at plus 300, and now he's at plus 110, and 65% of money is on the Duke star to get the award. But I think his teammate, if I was going to place a bet personally, I like Knippel at 20-1, just because Cooper Flagg has not dominated offensively, at least putting up big points. So Knippel, maybe he has a huge couple games here. I think he could easily win, and maybe you're getting a little value there at 20-1.
If you had to guess the biggest need for the book, because anyone that follows John Ewing on X, we know we're going to see that tweet on Saturday, either early evening or before the Duke Houston game, potentially. So if you had to predict, what is the biggest need for BetMGM Sportsbook, both games combined, come Saturday?
It's not Duke. Anybody but Duke. It doesn't matter. We'll take anybody. A Duke Florida final is the worst possible outcome. Flagg winning MOP is the worst outcome. But yeah, Duke getting upset here in the Final Four, that would work out all right for us.
Good to know. And on that note, last thing here, when you talk about potential NCAA tournament matchups, Duke, Florida is plus 150. Duke, Auburn, plus 225. Houston, Florida, plus 350. And Houston, Auburn is plus 475. Any bets in that market or any pre-tournament bets that are maybe impacting the liability in that market?
Not really. Nothing too notable there. I mean, Duke, Florida was the favorite before the tournament started. It just keeps... the line keeps dropping there. I think an interesting one, Duke or the field. Field minus 120, Duke even money. I think that's a fun bet just because Duke is clearly, in my opinion, the best team left in the tournament. But 2 games, anything can happen.
Yeah, you go back to the last time Duke lost in early February against Clemson. And again, I don't know if Houston's three-point defense holds up, and this was a road site for Duke when they played against their ACC rival in Clemson, but Houston is the most physical team Duke has faced, in my opinion, since that game. So I'm really intrigued to see how Cooper Flagg fares, and we saw him struggle against another physical team in Alabama in the Elite Eight, despite the fact that Duke obviously covered and advanced. So really intriguing 2 Final Four games. As much as some NCAA tournament fans and bettors don't want chalk, these games are incredible or should be incredible at least, from a viewership standpoint. So John Ewing of BetMGM, he is a data analyst for BetMGM Sportsbook, and really appreciate the time, John. Good luck to BetMGM and your Final Four bets in particular.
All right. Thanks, Eli. Appreciate having me on.
Remember to use promo code THELINES at BetMGM Sportsbook. Deposit $10, and you'll get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Or in select states, you can bet $10 and get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, with promo code THELINES. That's the lines, one word. Give the video a thumbs up and ring the bell if you enjoy the Final Four content. We'll be back later in the week with our Final Four betting preview with myself and a guest. And you could also check out all of our free bets in our Discord channel. Link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. So for John and for myself, Eli Hershkovich, so long, everybody, and good luck with your Final Four picks.